When a clinic error leaves waitress Mara Hill carrying billionaire Adrian Blackwell's child, their worlds collide in ways neither could expect. As love and trust grow amid chaos, they face the biggest decision of all. Can a mistake lead to the life they never dared to dream? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. Mara Hill wiped down another table at Joe's Diner, her feet aching after a double shift. The morning rush had been particularly busy, and her tip jar wasn't as full as she'd hoped. She glanced at her watch, just enough time to make it to the fertility clinic for that medical trial she'd signed up for. "You sure about this, honey?" asked Betty, the elderly waitress who'd taken Mara under her wing 5 years ago. "These medical trials sound fishy to me." "It's just a health screening, Betty," Mara said, untying her apron. "And they're paying $300. That's my electricity bill right there." Betty shook her head but smiled. "Always thinking ahead, aren't you? Just like when you're studying for those teaching classes after work." "Someone has to," Mara replied, grabbing her worn purse from under the counter. "I'll see you tomorrow." The bus ride to Coastal Heights Medical Center took 30 minutes. Mara spent it reviewing her teaching textbook, highlighting passages about childhood development. This was her dream, to become an elementary school teacher, but dreams cost money, and right now, she needed every extra dollar she could get. The clinic was fancy, nothing like the community health center she usually visited. Glass doors slid open silently, and the waiting room looked more like a hotel lobby. Mara felt out of place in her waitress uniform. "Miss Hill," a nurse called her name. "We're ready for you." The examination room was cold, and the paper gown they gave her crinkled as she sat on the table. Dr. Peterson, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, explained the routine procedures they'd be doing. "Just relax," the doctor said. "This won't take long." Across town in a gleaming skyscraper, Adrian Blackwell stood at his office window looking out at the city below. At 35, he'd built an empire, but legacy was on his mind. The phone on his desk buzzed. "Mr. Blackwell, Dr. Roberts from the fertility clinic is here. Send him in." Dr. Roberts entered, clutching his briefcase. "Everything's been arranged, as requested, Mr. Blackwell. The sample has been processed and stored. When you're ready to proceed with surrogacy, we'll have everything in place." Adrian nodded curtly. "Good. I want this handled discreetly. No press, no leaks. I need an heir, not a scandal." "Of course, sir. Our facility is known for its discretion." But neither Adrian nor Dr. Roberts could have predicted the chaos unfolding in the clinic's lab that very moment. Sarah Jenkins, a new lab technician, was having the worst day of her career. She'd stayed late to catch up on work, her eyes burning from fatigue. 2 files lay open on her desk, one for the medical trial program, one for the fertility clinic's regular procedures. In her exhaustion, she made a mistake that would change multiple lives forever. The next few weeks passed normally for Mara. She picked up extra shifts at the diner, attended her night classes, and tried to ignore the slight nausea she'd been feeling. When it didn't go away, she blamed it on stress. But one morning, while serving breakfast to her regular customers, the smell of bacon sent her running to the bathroom. "Third time this week," Betty said when Mara returned, face pale. "Honey, maybe you should see a doctor." "I can't afford," Mara started to say, but Betty cut her off. "You can afford to take care of yourself. Go on, I'll cover your tables." The community clinic was packed, but Mara waited patiently. When the doctor finally saw her, his news hit like a thunderbolt. "Miss Hill, you're pregnant." Mara stared at him. "That's impossible. I'm not." "About 6 weeks along," the doctor continued, checking his chart. "Everything looks normal so far." Mara's mind raced. 6 weeks ago, the only medical procedure she'd had was... No, it couldn't be. Could it? She called the fertility clinic immediately. The receptionist transferred her call multiple times before someone finally took her seriously. Within hours, the clinic's director was calling her back, his voice tense. "Miss Hill, we need you to come in right away." Meanwhile, Adrian was in the middle of a board meeting when his private line rang. Few people had that number, and fewer dared to use it. He stepped out to answer it. "Mr. Blackwell," Dr. Roberts' voice shook slightly. "We have a situation. There's been an accident at the clinic. Your sample, there was a mix-up." Adrian's grip on the phone tightened. "What kind of mix-up?" "Someone has been accidentally inseminated with your sample. She's pregnant." The phone cracked in Adrian's hand. "Find out who she is. Now." In the coming days, Mara's simple life exploded into chaos. The clinic's lawyers descended upon her with papers, explanations, and offers of compensation. but it was the name that caught her attention. Adrian Blackwell. Everyone knew that name. His face was on magazine covers, his business deals made headlines, and now somehow she was carrying his child. "We can make this go away quietly," one lawyer said, sliding a check across the table. The number had more zeros than Mara had ever seen, but Mara wasn't hearing the money talk. Her hand rested on her still flat stomach, and in that moment something fierce and protective woke inside her. "This is my baby," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I don't care whose mistake it was or how much money you're offering. I'm keeping my child." The lawyers exchanged glances. One pulled out his phone, dialing quickly. "Mr. Blackwell, she's refusing the offer." "Yes, sir. Yes, she's here now." There was a pause, and Mara could hear the sharp voice on the other end. "Tell her I'm coming down there. Nobody says no to Adrian Blackwell." Mara stood up, gathering her purse. "Well, he better get used to it, because I just did." As she walked out of the clinic into the bright sunlight, Mara had no idea that her life was about to become more complicated than she could ever imagine. And Adrian Blackwell, speeding toward the clinic in his private car, had no idea that the woman he was about to meet would shake the foundations of his carefully controlled world. Adrian Blackwell's black luxury car pulled up to the clinic with a screech of tires. The staff scattered as he stormed through the doors, his expensive suit and commanding presence parting the crowd like Moses with the Red Sea. His face was a mask of controlled fury as he approached the conference room. Mara had almost reached the exit when a security guard stepped in front of her. "Miss Hill, Mr. Blackwell requests that you stay." "Requests?" Mara crossed her arms. "Looks more like a demand to me." The guard shifted uncomfortably. "Please, miss, it would be better for everyone if you'd just talk to him." Before Mara could argue further, the double doors burst open. Adrian Blackwell was even more intimidating in person than in his magazine photos. Tall, dark-haired, with steel-gray eyes that could freeze hell over. But Mara refused to be intimidated. "Miss Hill," he said, his voice arctic cold, "I believe we need to discuss your situation." "My situation?" Mara felt her temper rising. "You mean the fact that your clinic got careless with their procedures?" "Step into my office," one of the clinic administrators suggested nervously. Inside the office, Adrian wasted no time. "Name your price." "Excuse me. Everyone has a price, Miss Hill. Name yours. Whatever number you're thinking of, I'll double it." Mara stared at him in disbelief. "You think you can just buy this baby?" "Buy me?" "This was never meant to happen," Adrian said, pacing the room. "I had a plan. Everything was arranged perfectly. A suitable surrogate, the right timing, complete privacy. Instead, I get—" He gestured at her dismissively. "A waitress," Mara finished for him. "Someone beneath your precious social status." "Someone unauthorized," he corrected sharply. "Someone who could turn this into a media circus. I don't want your money or your publicity, Mr. Blackwell. I just want to have my baby in peace." "Your baby?" His eyebrows shot up. "That child carries my DNA, my heir." "This child," Mara said, hand protectively over her stomach, "is growing inside me. I didn't ask for this either, but here we are, and I won't let you bully me into giving up my rights." Adrian's jaw clenched. "Do you have any idea what you're getting into? The media will tear you apart. Every detail of your life will be exposed, and raising a child costs money. A lot of it. I'll manage." "On a waitress's salary?" "While trying to become a teacher." He'd clearly done his homework. "Be reasonable, Miss Hill." "Reasonable?" Mara laughed without humor. "Was it reasonable for you to try to create an heir like you're ordering a product from a catalog? No messy relationships, no emotional attachments, just a business transaction?" Her words hit closer to home than Adrian expected. He turned to the window, gathering his thoughts. "I'm offering you a way out," he said finally. "A chance at a better life." "No, you're offering to buy my baby and my silence. There's a difference." The tension in the room could have been cut with a knife. Adrian's lawyers shifted uncomfortably, watching their usually composed boss struggling to maintain his cool. "Then we'll do this the hard way," Adrian said finally. "My lawyers will be in touch. I hope you're prepared for a legal battle, Miss Hill. Bring it on, Mr. Blackwell. I may not have your money, but I have something you don't. A heart." She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "And just so we're clear, I don't want your money, your name, or anything else from you. But this baby deserves to know both parents, so if you ever decide to be a father instead of a businessman, you know where to find me." The door closed behind her with a quiet click that somehow felt louder than if she'd slammed it. Adrian stood frozen, staring at the space she'd occupied. No one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had ever dared. "Sir," one of his lawyers ventured, "should we begin the legal proceedings?" "Not yet," Adrian said slowly. "First, I want everything you can find on Mara Hill. Every detail, every connection, every weakness we can use." But as his team scrambled to follow his orders, Adrian couldn't shake the image of her fierce expression, the protective way she'd touched her stomach, the fire in her eyes when she'd stood up to him. It was unsettling. Back at the diner, Mara's hands shook as she tied on her apron. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her terrified of what she'd just done. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Betty said, hurrying over. "What happened at the clinic?" Mara sank into a chair. "I just picked a fight with the most powerful man in the city. Adrian Blackwell. What's he got to do with your medical tests?" Before Mara could answer, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Miss Hill," a smooth voice said. "This is James Morton, Mr. Blackwell's head of security. Mr. Blackwell has arranged for a car to take you to and from work from now on, for your safety." "My safety?" Mara frowned. "Or to keep an eye on me?" "Both," the voice admitted. "The press will figure this out eventually. Mr. Blackwell prefers to be prepared." Mara looked out the diner window. A sleek black car was already parked across the street. "Tell Mr. Blackwell I can take the bus just fine." "Miss Hill," Morton's voice grew firmer. "This isn't a request. Mr. Blackwell protects his interests whether they want protection or not." The line went dead, and Mara stared at her phone. What had she gotten herself into? Betty watched the color drain from Mara's face. "Honey, what's really going on?" Mara looked at her friend, tears finally welling up. "I'm pregnant, Betty, and the father is Adrian Blackwell." "The billionaire?" Betty's eyes went wide. "But how—" "It's a long story," Mara said, wiping her eyes, "and I have a feeling it's only just beginning." Across town, Adrian sat in his penthouse office, staring at Mara's file on his tablet. A simple life, but an honest one. No scandals, no secrets. Straight A's in school despite working part-time since she was 16, volunteering at local children's charities while saving for teaching college. She wasn't what he'd expected. She wasn't what he'd planned for. "Sir?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The press is starting to ask questions about your visits to the fertility clinic." Adrian closed the file. "Tell them no. Comment. And get me everything you can on pregnancy healthcare. The best doctors, the best facilities." "Sir? If Mara Hill insists on having this baby, we're going to make damn sure both of them are healthy, whether she likes it or not." The sun set over the city, casting long shadows. In her small apartment, Mara curled up on her second-hand couch, one hand on her stomach. "Well, little one," she whispered, "looks like life's about to get very interesting." She had no idea how right she was. 3 weeks had passed since their confrontation at the clinic, and Mara's life had transformed into something she barely recognized. The black car still appeared every morning, but now she reluctantly accepted the rides. Morning sickness made the bus unbearable. One morning, as she approached the diner, she found Adrian Blackwell himself waiting outside. "We need to talk," he said, looking uncomfortable in the working-class neighborhood. "Your first prenatal appointment is today." Mara stopped short. "How do you know my medical schedule?" "Because I arranged it. Dr. Sarah Chen, the best obstetrician on the coast, she's expecting you at 10. "I already have a doctor at the community clinic." Adrian's jaw tightened. "A doctor who handles 50 patients a day in a crowded clinic. This is my child too, and I want the best care available." "I can't afford—" "I'm paying," he cut her off. "This isn't about you, Miss Hill. It's about the baby's health." Mara wanted to argue, but she knew he was right about one thing. The baby deserved the best care possible. "Fine," she said, "but I'm not missing my whole shift. Betty's already covering too many of my morning sickness breaks." Adrian looked at the diner, then back at Mara. To her surprise, he followed her inside. "Mr. Blackwell," Betty nearly dropped her coffee pot. "What brings you to our humble establishment?" "He's just leaving," Mara said quickly, but Adrian was already sliding into a booth. "I'll wait," he announced. "You can't work on an empty stomach in your condition." The regular customers whispered and stared as the famous billionaire sat in their local diner, looking completely out of place in his $1,000 suit. "Coffee?" Betty asked, approaching cautiously. "Fresh orange juice," Adrian replied, then looked at Mara. "And she'll have the same. Caffeine isn't good for the baby." Mara felt her temper flare. "I can order for myself." "Clearly not, since you are heading for the coffee pot." Betty looked between them, understanding dawning on her face. "Oh my stars, she whispered. "He's the father." "Betty, please," Mara begged, but the damage was done. The whispers grew louder. Adrian stood abruptly. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in private. I have work to do. You have a doctor's appointment. In 3 hours. Then, we'll discuss the legal arrangements over breakfast." Mara threw up her hands. "There are no arrangements to discuss. I've told you my decision, and I haven't accepted it." He turned to Betty. "I apologize, but I need to borrow your waitress." Before Mara could protest, he'd guided her out the door with a firm hand on her elbow. His touch sent an unexpected warmth through her arm. "Get in the car," he said, opening the door. "Please," he added, seeing her expression. The drive was tense. Adrian's driver navigated through morning traffic while they sat in uncomfortable silence. "You can't just hijack my life," Mara finally said. "I'm trying to help." "No, you're trying to control everything, just like you do with your business." Adrian turned to face her. "Is it so wrong to want to ensure my child has the best?" Something in his voice made Mara look closer. Behind the commanding facade, she caught a glimpse of something else. "Worry? Why did you really want an heir?" "This way?" she asked softly. "The truth." Adrian stared out the window. "My parents died when I was 12. Car accident. I was shipped off to boarding school while my uncle ran the company. When I finally took control at 21, I swore I'd never be vulnerable again. Business is clean, simple. Emotions are messy. Life is messy," Mara said, "especially with children, which is why I had a plan, a controlled environment, a carefully selected surrogate, clear boundaries." He looked at her. "Then you happened. Sorry to mess up your perfect plan." To her shock, Adrian's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "You're not sorry at all." "No," she admitted. "I'm not." They arrived at a sleek medical building. Dr. Chen's office occupied the entire top floor. The waiting room had just one other patient, a sharp contrast to the crowded clinic Mara was used to. "Miss Hill," Dr. Chen greeted them warmly. "And Mr. Blackwell, please come in." The examination room was state-of-the-art. As Dr. Chen prepared the ultrasound machine, Mara felt suddenly nervous. "Would you like Mr. Blackwell to stay?" the doctor asked. Mara looked at Adrian, who had retreated to the corner, his face unreadable. "It's his baby too," she said quietly. Adrian's head snapped up, surprise clear in his eyes. The sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, strong, fast, healthy. Mara felt tears in her eyes. When she glanced at Adrian, she saw him gripping the back of a chair, his knuckles white. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Chen said, pointing to the screen. "Would you like to know the sex?" "It's too early, isn't it?" Mara asked. "Not with our equipment. We can tell." Mara looked at Adrian again. He met her eyes, and for a moment something passed between them, a shared connection, a mutual wonder. "Yes," they said together. "Congratulations," Dr. Chen smiled. "It's a girl." Adrian sat down heavily. "A girl," he whispered. Later, in the car, neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Adrian cleared his throat. "My lawyer has drawn up some papers. Joint custody, generous support, a trust fund for the baby." "Adrian," Mara said, the first time she'd used his first name. "I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" "I want my daughter to have a father who loves her, not just a trust fund." Adrian was quiet for so long that Mara thought he wouldn't respond. Then, so softly she almost missed it, he said, "I don't know how." The vulnerability in those 4 words touched something in Mara's heart. "Maybe we can figure it out together," she offered. "Not as enemies." Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. "I'm not good at partnership." "Well, you're getting 9 months to practice?" Another almost smile. "You're not what I expected, Mara Hill." "Neither are you, Adrian Blackwell." As the car pulled up to the diner, Adrian spoke again. "The press. We'll find out soon. Let me handle it, please." Mara nodded, surprised by his use of please. "And Mara," he called as she got out, "thank you for today." She watched his car pull away, one hand resting on her stomach where their daughter grew. Something had shifted between them, subtle but undeniable. Inside the diner, Betty was bursting with questions, but Mara just smiled. "Things are complicated," she said. "Honey," Betty replied, watching Adrian's car disappear around the corner. "With that man, I bet they always are." She had no idea how right she was, or how much more complicated things would become. The headlines screamed across every tabloid in the city. "Blackwell baby scandal, billionaire's secret love child with small-town waitress." Mara stared at the newspapers piling up outside the diner. The morning crowd was twice its usual size, filled with people hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Phone cameras followed her every move. "Order up," Betty called, shooting angry looks at the gawking customers. "And if any of you bother my girl, you'll be wearing your breakfast instead of eating it." Mara's phone buzzed. "Adrian, have you seen the papers?" he asked without preamble. "Kind of hard to miss. Pack a bag. You're moving to my penthouse today." "Excuse me?" "The press is camping outside your apartment building. Some of my competitors are trying to dig up dirt. It's not safe. I'm not leaving my home." "Mara," Adrian's voice softened slightly. "Please, just until this dies down." Before she could argue further, a commotion erupted at the diner's entrance. A woman in designer clothes pushed through the crowd, her face twisted in fury. "So this is the gold digger who's trying to trap my nephew?" Mara froze. The woman stormed toward her, waving a newspaper. "Aunt Victoria," Adrian's voice came through the phone, sharp with alarm. "What's she doing there? How dare you try to worm your way into our family?" Victoria Blackwell jabbed a manicured finger at Mara. "How much did they pay you at that clinic to pull this stunt?" The diner fell silent. Mara felt her cheeks burn. "I didn't plan any of this," she said firmly. "Of course you did. Some little nobody from nowhere, suddenly carrying the Blackwell. Do you know how many women have tried to trap Adrian?" "That's enough!" Betty stepped between them. "Get out of my diner!" Victoria smiled coldly. "I'm offering you $5 million to disappear. Take it and end this circus." The customers gasped. Mara heard Adrian cursing through the phone. "No," Mara said simply. $10 million. "I said no." Victoria's smile vanished. "Then we'll destroy you. Every mistake you've ever made, every skeleton in your closet, we'll find them all. By the time we're done, no school will ever let you near children." Mara's teaching dreams flashed before her eyes. Her hands shook, but her voice stayed steady. "I don't have any skeletons, Mrs. Blackwell, and I'm not afraid of you." The diner's door burst open again. Adrian strode in, his face dark with anger. "Victoria, get out." "Adrian, darling, I'm handling this mess for you. The only mess here is you threatening the mother of my child." He turned to the staring customers. "Show's over. Leave, now." The diner emptied quickly. Even the reporters outside backed away from Adrian's thunderous expression. "You can't seriously be defending this waitress," Victoria sputtered. "Her name is Mara, and yes, I am." Adrian's voice was ice cold. "You're no longer welcome at the company, Victoria. Your consulting position is terminated." "You can't do that. I'm family." "Family doesn't threaten family. And like it or not, Mara and this baby are my family now." Victoria stormed out, leaving shocked silence behind. Adrian turned to Mara. "Are you all right?"